Kia ora, humanimals. I'm not sure how to present this case to you and how to talk about it because it's very dense. A lot has happened and, the storytelling isn't my strong suit. But I'll give it a go. I'll just work through things and I will start the video after not too long periods of time, perhaps, and try not to jump around too much and try not to reveal certain things straight away as well. You may even know about this murder case. The reason I want to talk about it here on my channel is because, of course, the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew is a case we've talked about a lot here, not so much recently. And it's interesting to think about the correlations between the murder of Corryn Rayney and the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew. So here we go. Corryn Veronica Ann Da Silva, her maiden name, and Lloyd Rayney were both of Indian descent, and they were both immigrants with their families decades ago into Australia. Lloyd had come from Yemen, and Corryn and her family had escaped Idi Amin's dictatorship in Uganda. And both Corryn and Lloyd worked as well-known professionals in legal circles in Perth, Australia. Corryn worked for the Registrar's Office and Lloyd was a barrister who mostly tried criminal cases. He'd had, quite an eventful career. He had helped prosecute police. He was a bit of a divisive figure, but he certainly has very strong supporters in terms of colleagues of his, other lawyers, etc., who have supported him throughout. And he's certainly been someone who will divide the true crime community. And indeed, gossips in the true crime community convicted him back in 2007 when Corryn disappeared and thereafter. Mainly because of what, we often discuss when it comes to a missing wife. The 70% chance that it's someone she knows, and if there's trouble in a marriage, it has to be the husband, right? So this is basically what happened to Lloyd. He was named as a suspect by a senior officer in the WA police force, Jack Lee, early on in the case, and wasn't charged until 2010, went to trial in 2012, was found not guilty in a juryless court, appearing before a judge that was brought in from interstate. And the appeal by the police was dismissed as well. He was acquitted in 2013. The case cost the WA police force over $20 million. It certainly cost Lloyd Rayney over $5 million to defend himself. And he won a lawsuit against WA police to the tune of $2.62 million. And people still question his guilt. And we can talk about how he actually may have committed the crime of murder of his wife, Corryn. There's a lot of interesting things to mull over there. There's also other people that should have been investigated as suspects and who are now ignored. So Corryn and Lloyd, they're living in a suburb south of the river from the city of Perth. The city of Perth is similar to Brisbane in some way because it's a river city and the city is inland a little. And the river, it gives Perth a kind of complicated layout. But Lloyd and Corryn and their two daughters, Caitlin, who was born in 1994, and Sarah, born in 1997, they lived in a suburb called Como. I've been to Perth once, and 3 of the sites integral to this case were places that I happened to stay in or go to. I stayed in Como. So Como is only a few minutes drive from the city over the river. Caitlin and Sarah were being educated in elite private schools. And as I said before, Corryn and Lloyd were working as professionals in the legal profession. Sorry if I'm sounding stilted. So on August the 7th, Corryn goes, as she has done for a number of years, off to a boot scooting dance class. This is held at Bentley Community Hall. It's south east from the home in Como. Again, only a few minutes drive. And Lloyd reported that she left in a happy mood at about 7:30. She attends dance class and at 9:30 is seen walking out to her car. No one in the dance class reports seeing her get into the vehicle or driving off. And this is the last Corryn Rayney is seen until her body is found over a week later in Kings Park. So that night, Caitlin, the older daughter, had arranged the night before, just the day before, to go with friends to a Gwen Stefani concert being held at a venue that's no longer operating as an entertainment venue. It's sort of a dome, hyperdome. I can't remember the name of it. I will. And Burswood Dome. Lloyd's home alone with daughter Sarah, puts Sarah to good night apparently at 9:30 or thereabouts. Caitlin returns home at 10:30 to 10:45, is dropped off from the concert by her friend and her friend's mother, whom Lloyd invites into the home in Como, but they refuse, and they note later that they didn't see Corryn's car parked outside the home or in the driveway when they arrived to drop Caitlin off. The next day, Lloyd goes to work. He's seen by a reporter who knows him quite well walking in. She states that he seemed perfectly normal, relaxed, because there was another news story happening at the time and plenty of people around. And Lloyd is a well-known figure, especially for these type of, the reporters that follow cases in the courts. He calls Corryn at her workplace a couple of times, not getting hold of her. And then her work, the registrar's office of the Supreme Court, calls Lloyd to ask, is Corryn all right, because she hasn't turned up for work. And this is extremely out of character. Corryn was dedicated to her career and was a very liked professional person, and it was extremely out of character for her to not turn up. That morning, the girls and Lloyd had just gotten ready without seeing her, perhaps presuming that she had already left for work, perhaps having a big workload that day. Why wouldn't Lloyd know that she had not arrived home, if that was the case, or had left early for work? Because this family appeared to be a tight unit, appearing at events together, sharing holidays and raising their children in a way that showed them attending functions and appearing on the outside to be a united family. But this was very, very far from the case. And Lloyd was able to say that he didn't know that his wife didn't return home, even though it transpired that they were supposed to talk at 9:30 after her return from boot scooting about the dissolution of their marriage, custody of the children, division of assets, and this was apparently going to be an amicable discussion. And Lloyd says that he thought maybe she just decided to bail on that idea and not come home, and asserted that sometimes she did not come directly home after boot scooting. So Lloyd contacts the police, and Corryn's listed as a missing person, and the search is on. In the next few days, Lloyd makes a speech at a press conference where he's flanked by Sharon, his sister-in-law, Corryn's sister, and he makes an impassioned plea for Corryn to be found. A few days after that, Corryn's car is found. And this is in a suburb called Subiaco. So Kings Park is on the edge of the city, kind of up high on a cliff, and you look down over the Swan River and over historical buildings and toward the sparkling, glass of the city, over the sparkling water of the Swan River. And attached or adjacent to the north side of Kings Park is a suburb called Subiaco, which is one of these suburbs where you'll find the trendy, architectural designed furniture stores, and you'll find just some older buildings with, the vibe of fresh restaurants, snazzy, the snazzy hotels, high-end shopping for clothing and all sorts of products. It's just one of those well-to-do inner city suburbs. The interesting thing about the car was it's just abandoned in a street called Kershaw Street. This is a street where colleagues of Lloyd's live. 2 lawyers that he knows through work live. But the interesting thing is the car appears to have broken down. It couldn't have possibly have gone any further as a getaway car if this is the case, because the car has leaked gearbox. From the gearbox, its oil has left a trail. The car was just found because it was put out on the radio. We're looking for this 2005 white Ford Fairmount, license plate is this, and a lady called in to say, well, I've seen this car, it's parked in the street. There's footage of a policeman filming as cars, and he's walking, following the trail of oil, whilst police cars are behind him, driving slowly in a sort of blockade. And the trail is traced Thomas Street, which skirts Kings Park, and traced into Kings Park, down one of the roads, down one of the tracks, and it leads to a place where a bollard has been just bowled over, and this is what has ruined the gearbox engine. Police walked 50 metres down the track that the car had driven into, 50 metres, and just off the track they find a gravesite, and they find Corryn Rayney's body, and she has been buried on her back, feet up, just head first, thrown down into this grave where it's deeper at the end where her head is, which has created a situation where decomposition is accelerated. And it's unfortunate for the forensic investigators because they couldn't determine mode of death for Corryn, but they can see that there are injuries to her head, her neck, her brain, bleeding in between the vertebrae of the spine and everything, but they think some things may have happened after death, and they do think she was dead when she was put into the grave. Lloyd Rayney is arrested, and He's out on bond. He has 2 daughters who are 10 and 13 to look after, and it's ruled that he also needs to be able to have access freely to his law team, to resources, so that he can work on his defence.